Welcome to this week's Aiding Your Game. Today we're going to be talking about NPC creation, how to make them different and diverse in your games. And before we dive into this week's video, make sure you go down and hit that subscribe button to help us grow. Also give us a thumbs up and hit that bell for notifications so you get when we post new content each week. Now, I just partook in Reaper Miniatures Virtual March Expo, and I have to say I was blown away. The amount of content and focus that they put on for the consumers absolutely blew my mind. As you've seen from some of our other videos, I use Reaper Miniatures a lot in my own tabletop gaming. So because they're not a sponsor, you can take my word for it that I really enjoy not only the quality of products that they create, but also just the vast diversity in the miniatures that they create. We're going to have an upcoming video where we're going to be unboxing the Bones 5 Kickstarter from Reaper. Make sure you join us for that. But they also just announced the Reaper Con, which will be taking place in September. Now, if you have an interest in gaming, tabletop miniatures, miniature painting, miniature sculpting, I highly recommend you go check out reaperminiatures.com. Now we've got another video series that's currently ongoing that we're talking about different types of storytelling and mechanic use. We're calling it role play versus role play or rolling play. For Aiding Your Game, we want to continue working on how we can help better your tabletop experience. So for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be focusing on DM challenges. Now I put a questionnaire out on social media, just what were your top challenges that I can give some advice or hints and tips, tricks on how to overcome some of your DM challenges. Of course, we specified that was primarily for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, but I welcomed it up for any genre or RPG system. The feedback I got was really fantastic. It was a lot of repetitiveness in some of the things that people struggle with in their campaigns. I think the majority, by far, of the comments I got that GMs are struggling with is focusing on NPCs, making them different, making them diverse, and then tracking the NPCs that they're creating. Now, to help with this system, we're currently building something that we're going to launch on DM's Guild that should help anybody, whether you're a seasoned GM or a new GM. We don't have a lot of details. As we get closer to launch, I'll be sure to add details into our videos that we're producing at the time. We expect to be about a month, maybe two out from launching that product. But as we look at tabletop gaming, NPCs are a big part of most campaigns. Whether your players are looking for information, looking for quests, or even looking for the reward for completing a quest, the PCs are going to have to interact with something. And that's where NPCs really come into play. Now, as a GM, when you're creating NPCs, there are times you'll be able to pre-plan who they are, how they tie into your story arc, how they tie into your game world, what their roots are, and who they are as a person in your campaign. However, there are other times where you just have to make up an NPC on the fly because the characters have gone in a direction you didn't expect. They've decided to ask more questions than you expected, or they may even just throw you completely off and decide to go about a town talking to different people that you just weren't prepared for. Now, regardless of whether you're at a virtual tabletop or at an actual tabletop, the number one thing that I can recommend for everybody is to have just some scratch paper and a pencil there. I know there are things like Google Docs and other formats where you can quickly take notes. However, just being able to jot things down as you're talking or role playing can make a world of difference. I highly recommend just having a piece of paper and a pen or pencil nearby so you can just jot down quick notes. Now, as for NPCs, one of my top pieces of advice is to utilize some type of inspiration. You don't want to be offensive or really rip anything off. There are times where you just have to pull some inspiration from a source you know. For instance, if your party is encountering a NPC that's the first time, try to quickly think of something that you've watched recently. Maybe it's The Walking Dead or Gilligan's Island. Maybe it's WandaVision or even The Lion King. Think of a character that they could bump into that may seem out of place but may not seem out of place. Jot a quick note down on who that NPC is. So quickly come up with a name. Hey, I'm Gill. And then just a quick short description of kind of how they act. That way you can emulate it and build on it if you need to. Now Gill, our Gilligan-inspired NPC, may never come into the adventure again, but there may be good interaction from the player characters to your NPC, and you'll want to have that NPC come back again by having a couple of quick notes there that Gill is slightly inept and maybe in over his head, a bit clumsy and subservient to someone he calls Skip. Just those few little notes that you jot down can help you re-emulate that Gill character again in the future, especially if you decide to bring them along and have them become a bigger and bigger part of the background or foreground in your campaign. Now, as you're looking for making your NPCs even more different, think about your points of inspiration. You don't have to have the whole cast of Gilligan's Island be represented in your tavern setting of NPCs. Start pulling from different pieces. Aside from our NPC of Gill, we may have a Glenn, who we quickly say his name is Glenair. Just to make it different, he's fairly smart, a little bit compassionate, worried about the outcome of what his interactions with others is going to lead to. Now he's going to have a completely different interaction with our PCs versus Gill, and both characters can be extremely diverse. Rather than making them both human, maybe Gill is actually a gnome, while Glenn is an Aarakocra. Again, one of the key points is making sure you take down notes. That way, these more memorable NPCs can continue to have an impact on your story, and as you present them to your players, you're consistent. Now, not every NPC needs that. They can be someone who just really doesn't have any distinguishing characteristics, clothing or armor, information, just another NPC that the PCs run into. Now, these types of NPCs don't need that much detail. You can just narrate rather than having to give it to them in a voice. Just be the narrator of the story as they're interacting with this NPC, trying to get a bit of information rather than worrying about having a distinct voice or mannerisms or names or anything like that. You can just narrate the interaction to your PCs. This allows you to really keep the focus on more important NPCs who are going to contribute to the story in one way, shape, or form. And let other NPCs who are not going to impact the players, the story, or the story arc really fade into the distance. Now, some of these NPCs that you're not putting too much focus on, they can be a little staticky and you may have to revisit them at some point. By not putting down many details, you're able to then flesh them out if you need. However, rather than that one patron in a tavern that they spoke to once who didn't really have any information, they can bump again into a Gill or a Glenn and have further interactions that are in line with those NPCs. Now, a common trick that good GMs have is to have a list of names that they can readily just access and to be able to say who that NPC is and kind of what their position is. It's a good idea to have something like this. I always tell people, have a list of 60 names and print it off, have it ready to go. If you introduce an NPC by name, just scratch it off and quickly next to the name just put what function they have. And then if you're using any mannerisms, put a line through the name, Captain of the Guard, and then do Cockney accent. Doesn't have to be super descriptive, and again, it may be an NPC that the players never run into again, so you don't have to explore that NPC further or give them any further meat on their bones. However, it gives you a point if they decide to seek out that captain of the guard. You quickly have the name, what their function is, kind of how you role-played them. Now, if you jumble these up, it's no big deal. Maybe they're some type of an entertainer who was just putting on an act the last time the characters met them. If they call you out for not utilizing the same voice or mannerisms, quickly and easily just make it that maybe they're a criminal and they're trying to disguise themselves so they don't get caught, especially while talking to powerful NPCs. Now, I know there are lots of tools online to help with NPC generation and organization. Finding the best way for you to organize and keep track of your NPCs to have consistency in your game is really up to you, but I really recommend that you find a way to not only organize but store that information so that you can continue to go back to it. Because again, if you want good immersion for your players, if you want their characters to be exploring a world where there's a lot of consistency to that world, then having interactions that are consistent from session to session are very key to help emulate that immersive experience. It helps bring your world to life, makes it feel more real, and gives your players a reason to continue coming back to the game for that good, continuous, consistent experience. I'd love to hear how you've integrated and organized and implemented and kept track of your NPCs. Please leave a comment down below and let me know your secrets on how you make your worlds consistent in the presentation of NPCs. If you've had NPCs take a major part in your story arcs or your characters' stories, and any feedback that you've gotten from your players specifically focused or targeting your NPC integration, presentations, and use at your table. So in a quick wrap up for NPCs, stay organized, use inspiration, be consistent, don't put too much where it's not needed, and remember, they're just NPCs in the story you're creating with your characters at the gaming table. Don't make them be the stars of the show. Remember, they're the extras and guest stars on occasion. Until next week, I hope you have fantastic games, and be sure to let us know, where will your adventures take you? Thanks for watching that video. I hope you enjoyed it. Here's another video I think you might enjoy. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up, and make sure to hit that bell so you get notifications whenever we post new videos. Help us answer the question of, where will your adventures take you?